of Charlie's basic creeds is that all the girls are for is to fuck or make love. And that's all they're for, and that there is no crime, there is no sin, that everything's all right, that it's all just a game, just like games of a little kid, only it's grown-up games. He has body control of his hands and his arms and his fingers to the point that it's like watching something that constantly changes when he's moving. It doesn't ever appear to be the same on any two movements. And while everyone that he's with is on the effects of these drugs, he uses his hands and his fingers and says that he can pass the motion on to you when you get tuned in to the infinite, or when you give up, is what he calls it, and play under everyone, play under the awareness of all people. And to play under the awareness of all people is to be able to steal and to be able to do all things that people couldn't do because they weren't smart enough. And he's talked about his prison experiences and where he's learned many things about hypnosis and what you can do with the power of the mind from a man named Lanier Raymer, who was a cellmate. During this time, several people had come along, and he had persuaded them in the same manner that he was Jesus, and that everything man did was backwards to what it was supposed to be, and that making love was good and not bad, and that group orgies was the way to get tuned in. And he had convinced several girls, and he's got them tied up in this manner, and also through fear, because he's beaten up several girls that I know of. One, Mary Brenner, and another girl he beat up was Diane Bluestein. I've seen him jerk her around by her hair and slap her and make her cry and hit her and do all kinds of things with her and make her suck guys' dicks. And other girls, the ones that don't like to be there but don't know what else to do, such as Sandy Good. She's been more or less cajoled or talked into it or threatened into getting money from her dad from San Francisco on several occasions in order to finance the group. And he's made her do all kinds of acts that she didn't want to do. But he grabbed her by the head and shoved her head down, and while he was making love to her at the same time. And this is part of his group orgy effect. He wants everybody to do everything. And you can make love with 6 or 7 people at the same time if you get tuned in, is what he says. While at Barker's Ranch, part of the rules was that while it was warm enough, that everyone was to go nude. So that I suppose that would stimulate sexual interest, and everybody would wind up making love all day long. And I heard him comment once that wouldn't it be nice if we could just stay in bed forever and make love and not have to worry about eating, because eating wasn't important. It was only a way to get out your sexual interests, like smoking cigarettes. And he said that everything stemmed from sex. And I suppose he got that idea from Lanier Raymer in prison or from a Freud book he read. But everything was vaginal or penal, and that it all stemmed from sex. Everything that you did was make love, from putting a screw into a fixture, from putting a cigarette in your mouth, from drinking coffee, to opening a door, to getting in a car, to sweeping. Anything you did was sex from his viewpoint, and he was telling everyone there that that was what it stemmed from, that that's all it was. Everything was making love, and that was what God really wanted you to do, because that's why he gave men a nutsack and a Peter and girls a pussy, as he puts it.
That didn't last very long, okay?
He said that a woman actually had no soul, but was closer to being tuned in than the man, because God put woman there to take care of man, and that was all woman was supposed to do, take care of him and tend to his wants at all times, and she wasn't to give any opinions or talk to the man or say anything, and that you could put your love into her through sex and fill her up with your love, And he would always say, do what your love says do. But before he would say this, he would say that he was your love. And so it was implied around in this sort of a comment that you were to do everything he said because he would do anything for you. He said that he died on a cross once for you, and that it was the Christians' turn to hang the Romans on the crosses. Charlie had told me that I was living in death and that I was supposed to give up my world so that I could have his, and that by giving up, God would come through me, and I would just be a hole in the infinite, as he says he is. When he came back, he started his games of trying to get me to go back with him. And he said that he'd release me from no agreements, that I was still his, and that I should be able to do anything he said and not think about it, because that's what love does. Love doesn't fight, it gives up. And to give up would be to be God. Charlie, or Charles, says that giving up is to become God, and that everything is God, and that eating meat is like eating yourself, and any time there's an animal there, any meat that comes in is given to the animal, and if there's food enough only for the dog to eat, the dog gets the food, and the people are supposed to suck on each other and get their nourishment that way, because everything's an oral fixation or complex or something. And he calls guns phallic symbols, big phallic symbols that guys get their rocks off by shooting. And he says that people who need guns are the ones that are going to die. And people that have guns are the ones that he's going to kill. I've been threatened with knives, and he said that I'm willing to give my life up for you, and I'm willing to let you kill me, so that means I can kill you. I've had my life threatened several times, and I've seen him jerk people around by the hair, hold a knife to their throat, and say, you know I can kill you, don't you? And then after that he says, but I wouldn't because you're one of us. He's talked to me several times about how I should give up and be willing to do anything he wanted me to do. And at one point he was saying that if I loved him and was willing to give up, and since it was all a game, life was a game and death was a game, that it wasn't real, that I should go walk to Shoshone, take a big, some kind of a machete-like thing, sneak into Sheriff Ward's house and cut his throat. That was if I loved him. And he wanted me to do it, but he never pushed it any further than that. I've seen him with 2 shotguns. One is a double-barrel over and under shotgun. I guess it's used for skeet shooting. And the other is a 12-gauge pump shotgun. And I've seen approximately a knife on every one, and Charlie sometimes has 2 or 3 with him. And I've seen him that he can throw a knife approximately 10 or 15 feet and be deadly accurate with it. And that he's mentioned that he wouldn't be taken alive, and that he would think no more of killing one of us than he would of going and stepping on a flower. In fact, he'd rather do that than step on a flower. He said that killing of a person isn't as bad as the people who go around with their big phallic symbols and shoot birds and hunt and fish and do all those hunting or sporting things. And he's mentioned that he would take great pride in killing a cock or a piggy, and that he'd take as many as he could. He said once that if he didn't make it, then either his kids or someone else's kids would do it. That the love was in the children, and that you had to set the children free. And free to him is making them do obscene sex acts when they're old enough to crawl and old enough to use their mouth. Since he's been there this time, he's stayed, I guess, 2 nights, and each night he's been there, he's had from 8 people, I guess approximately 8 people each time. And he builds a bonfire out in the middle of the yard using up all the wood that's available. And he gets a guitar and has everybody smoke marijuana and gets them all stoned. And then they sing songs. And one of the songs is a repeat after me song, in which he'll start the song and say, "Who's God?" The people around him will answer back, "Who's God?" then he'll say, "You're God," and they'll answer back, "You're God," and he'll say, "I'm God," and they'll say, "I'm God," and then he'll say, as in a statement, "I'm God," and they'll answer back the same way. And he gets them into an emotional frenzy, and this is supposed to lead to sex.